And your idea, Alastair, is that there is a better solution than just fossil fuels.
It was invented in the UK in 1956. The world's first commercial nuclear power station was built at Calder Hall, which then changed its name to Windscale, which changed its name to Sellafield. Now, we threw that place together very quickly because Britain was building an atomic bomb, and the Labour government and the Conservative governments of the time felt it was essential, having given all of our nuclear technology to the Americans as part of the Manhattan Project, and then being denied by an act of Congress from accessing that technology, that we had our own nuclear bomb. And the reality was Calder Hall was mostly built to get the necessary components to build a bomb. But as a byproduct, when the Queen opened it in 1956, it generated electricity. Britain was the largest generator of nuclear power all the way through to 1972, just in time for the 1973 oil shock to come. We started walking away from the technology at that time. We had our own designs, advanced gas-cooled reactors and so forth. And we built a series of different, and we also built reprocessing for nuclear materials coming from countries like Germany and Japan. So very advanced stuff. We kind of walked away from it, partly as a response to 3 Mile Island, where there was an accident, partly as a response to Chernobyl, and probably reinforced by Fukushima. But the reality is, when you look at the number of people killed because of nuclear power, it's probably one of the safest forms of energy generation. But there are obvious safeguards. And there are a whole series of myths as well which have grown up around nuclear, which we can address as we go on. But essentially, fissile material, i.e. material that can be split, when a large atom like uranium splits, it forms into smaller atoms and gives off an enormous amount of energy, as encapsulated by the famous equation E equals mc squared. Energy is equal to mass times the speed of light squared. So absolutely phenomenal levels of energy. 1 kilo of uranium contains as much energy as 2.5 million tons of coal. 1 kilo equals 2.5 million tons of coal. Now, with current technology, we only access about 1 or 2% of that potential energy. So it's still, 2,500 tons of coal, but we can reprocess that fuel and use it again and again and again and again and again. We currently don't, but we actually do have the technology in the UK working at the Thorpe plant in Sellafield to reprocess that. Now, so nuclear energy, as part of this energy equation equals mc squared, enormous amounts of heat are given off, which superheats water in a cycle, which is completely separate. There's a heat exchanger, and that water gets boiled at high temperature and high pressure, and that creates steam, which drives the turbines. Now, that's on all day long, 24/7, 365 days a year. And we need to change the fuel rods from time to time, but there's a whole sequence of things we can do around that. So you get continuous energy formed by nuclear. Now, that energy now, since 1956, call it 60, so you got around about 65 years of experience worldwide, several hundred nuclear plants worldwide. In the 1970s, the Americans started building a new reactor every 14 days. Every 14 days. And we used to build these things in 2 to 3 years. But sometime around the mid-70s, starting in America, but quickly followed by Europeans, the regulatory system was instituted, which is known by the acronym ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable. And the idea was we had to keep the risk as low as reasonably achievable, based on the idea that a human could only absorb so many sieverts of nuclear radiation in their lifetime. But we now know, because of DNA, that actually the DNA can repair itself. So we know that those levels have been set way too low. We can because many people live in areas of the country like Cornwall, where you have rocks which give off radioactivity, and they have a background radiation much higher than people that work in a nuclear power station. If you eat 1 banana a day, you're exposed to more nuclear radiation than somebody that works at Sellafield. So we've got our knickers in a twist, if I can use that language. over the dangers. We've over-egged the dangers, and I think there's political motivations for people to do that. So the ALARA system has morphed into a kind of perversion of it, which is created a system where it's as high as humanly imaginable. I call it the Ahahi system. And what we need to do is we need to put our foot on the ball. And instead of running around like 5-year-olds chasing the ball, we need to think about a more expansive game. We should look up, look around, and we need to change the regulatory framework in the UK. We've got the freedom to do it. We're out of Euratom, we're out of the EU. We've got the freedom, and we could set an example to the rest of the world for reasonable, safe regulation. It should be safer than any other form of electricity generation, because people die falling off wind turbines. Construction industry loses people putting roof panels on, which aren't included in the statistics for deaths for solar. And we have the ability with nuclear to have a completely new generation of British designed, British built, British regulated nuclear power stations up and down the country, which should be far, far cheaper. We should be looking at 2 to 3 pence per kilowatt hour.